everyone, so this is probably the last video in which you guys will have this background behind me. I am moving this week, so I'm pre-filming some of my videos just so that way I have a bit of a buffer in case my internet doesn't work when I move, and you know, just to kind of give myself a bit of a breather while I'm getting everything set up in my apartment. So today I am bringing you the last of my August reviews. I ended up reading 11 books in August, so I filmed it in 2 parts. I can't believe I read 11 books in August. I have been so busy getting ready for this move that I have no idea how I read this much. You guys have seen all the unhauls I've been doing of all my books, and like I maybe showed you guys a quarter of the books that I got rid of, not to mention all the other stuff I've been purging and just kind of having to purchase stuff and like get rid of stuff and get ready for this move. It's been a huge process, but somehow I still read 11 books and I have no idea how. So the first book I'm going to talk to you about, I don't actually own a physical copy because it is like $900 online for the Penguin English Library and I refuse to spend that much, so I made do with the audiobook. It is Our Mutual Friend by Charles Dickens, and I was supposed to be reading this as part of the buddy read that Katie over at Books and Things is leading, in which we read it in the serialized format, so you read like 4 chapters a month and you kind of read it how it was published. I'm not patient enough for that, so I listened to the audiobook over the course of a week's worth of like commuting, and I absolutely love this book. It kind of deals with the concept of inheritance and marrying for money and whether or not marrying for money is valuable and greed, and it does it in a much different way than A Christmas Carol, one of Dickens' other works that deals with greed, and I just really enjoyed this. It's definitely up there in my like top 5 Dickens novels. Like Bleak House is definitely #1. Nothing has shaken my love for Bleak House. David Copperfield and Nicholas Nickleby are kind of tied for like 2nd and 3rd place, and I think this is like #4, followed by like Little Dorrit. And I think that's like my top 5 Dickens, and depending on how the rest of them go, it might stay that way, but I really enjoyed it. So if you haven't given this Dickens a chance, definitely give this one a read. I really, really highly recommend it. The next 2 books I have to talk about are part of a series that I finished this month, and I'm a little sad. The last book actually made me cry, guys. It made me cry actual tears. I was out shopping and I was listening to it on audiobook while I was, you know, doing some errands to get ready to move, and I started crying in the middle of a store. That's how much this book moved me. This is teaching me not to listen to audiobooks while I shop. And it is the Barset series. So the last 2 books in that are The Small House at Ellington, and then I almost dropped the last book on my lap, The Last Chronicle of Barset. I have loved this series so much. Like, I didn't think I would. When I first read The Warden 2 years ago, I gave it 3 stars. I thought it was just okay. It wasn't a fantastic book. It wasn't something that I was like, oh, I'm really eager to read the rest of the series. But as I already owned the 2nd and 3rd books, 2 years later, I was like, you know what? I either need to read these or get them off my shelf. So I decided to give them a chance because I had heard I would really enjoy Dr. Thorne, and boy did I love this series. The Warden is definitely the weakest novel. You do kind of have to read it if you're going to read the entire series, because its characters show up in all of the other books. And it's just, it's such a good series that I'm willing to forgive The Warden. And I might want to revisit The Warden. But now with the books that I actually read this month. So The Small House at Ellington deals with the Dale family. It is Squire Dale and Lucy Dale, his niece, and Belle Dale, her sister, and they are living at the small house at Ellington, and the Squire lives at the big house. So their father died, and the Squire was nice enough to offer their mother and them the living that normally goes to the Dowager Squire, if that makes sense, the dowager of the estate. So they're living there rent-free. There are some tensions there in that they don't always understand each other, and they kind of have a bit of a conflicted relationship, which is one of the central plots of the story. This is one of the weaker novels for me. I loved Dr. Thorne. I thought Dr. Thorne was great. Framley Parsonage was fantastic. Like even Barchester Towers was really great, but this is probably my 2nd least favorite. It is ranked #5 out of the 6 books. I found Lucy Dale to be a really frustrating heroine. she gets engaged quite early in the story to a man, and he is described as a swell. So basically he's a young man about town who like is on the up and up, and it doesn't go well. And basically her reaction to it is just so extreme, and like this reaction covers this book, and it also takes place in the last Chronicle of Barset, and it's just kind of, you're just like, all right, enough already. And you kind of feel that like with the people around her are also sharing that reaction, and it's really interesting. But this is still a really great book. I still really enjoyed reading this. Like, it just is absolutely fantastic. It's just, it's not quite as good as Dr. Thorne or The Last Chronicle of Barset. So then The Last Chronicle of Barset kind of wraps up all the other works. It has pretty much every single character I want to say is mentioned in this that in the previous 5 books we've come to know and love. Some of them we don't get to spend as much time with. I wish we had spent more time with Frank Gresham and Mary Thorne. Like, they were some of my favorite people, and we sadly didn't get to spend a lot of time with them. But, you know, we did get to follow up on Lucy Dale's story and John Eames and, you know, the Crawleys, and we got to look in on Lady Lufton and Lord Lufton and all that, and it was such a really great end. It was really satisfying too, and sad, because this has taken place over almost like 20 years, I want to say. There, people who were old in the first books, natural causes happen, and it actually made me cry. But yeah, I really, really enjoyed this series, and I didn't think I would after The Warden. So if you've read The Warden and you're kind of iffy on it, definitely give the Chronicles of Barset Shire a chance. I am looking forward to reading more Trollope. I definitely want to start on the Palliser series sometime soon. I'm going to give myself a little bit of a break and try and read some other books, but I do really want to read those. So the next is an author who, when I first started reading them, I absolutely loved. And then I got about 3 books into his bibliography, and I was kind of like, for whatever reason, just didn't pick up another book for a really long time. And that's Ian Forster, and I read Where Angels Fear to Tread. I really enjoyed Howard's End, and I really enjoyed A Room with a View. Maurice was kind of hit and miss with me, and this one was a definite miss. This is Forster's first novel, and it's quite small, and it's just, oh my god. For such a short book, it felt long. It just dragged. Oh, it was a pain to read. It deals with Lila Harrington. I don't even remember the characters' names. Like, this is how little impact this book made on me. And it kind of is this overdrawn, romantic, kind of weird Italian plot, and it just is very, very strange. I would not recommend this unless you're going through all of Ian Forster's books. So yeah, just not great. Not great. Not a fan of that. And then another author who I'm trying to read their bibliography, and kind of a disappointing read for me as well. So I, you know, started off the month really great with some really great reads, and then it was just a bit more disappointing towards the end, and that is Henri de Balzac's Eugenie Grandet. This lacked something. I really enjoyed Ursule Mirouet and Père Goriot, which were the first 2 that I read by Balzac. This is the 3rd Balzac I've read, and it just kind of, it fell a little bit flat. The main character, Eugenie Grandet, is a rich, young heiress. Her father is kind of a miser, and they lead this really kind of sad and like miserly life where every little bit of income is accounted for. And then her cousin Charles comes along, and she falls madly in love with him, and it's just, I don't know, it was just kind of dull. Like, I don't know, there was nothing about this that really drew me in. It was a really quick read. I think I read it in like an hour and a half. It's quite a short novel, but just, yeah, nothing amazing about this. I was a little disappointed, but I still have Cousin Bet sitting on my shelf to read, so I will be pursuing more Balzac, but I might give it a couple months before I tackle my next one. So those are the books. Oh, and I have one more book that I almost forgot about because I don't own a physical copy of this book, and it is Ramallah by George Eliot. I'm listening to this on audiobook. It was one of those like Whispersync books that was ridiculously cheap. It was like $2 or something like that, and I was like, you know what? I didn't really love Daniel Deronda, but I do want to keep reading George Eliot, and this is such a weird book. Like, for me especially, it's a weird book because it deals with a period of history that I study. It's a historical novel, so it deals with Florence in the 1400s, around the time of Savonarola and the Bonfire of the Vanities. So this is a period that I have spent like a fair amount of time studying and like know quite a bit about, and it's really weird because there's all these historical like figures that I've studied and all these historical events that I've studied, and they're in this work of fiction. And I don't normally like historical novels. I probably wouldn't have picked it up if I had known it was a historical novel. I just kind of was like, all right, it's a George Eliot novel, I need to read it. So it's surprisingly good though. Like, as far as historical accuracy, I mean, I haven't been going through with a fine-tooth comb, but like dates and things and people and all that kind of stuff are fairly accurate to the history. So if you're not like me and haven't, you know, studied this, I would say it's a decent book. Like, it's about a 3-star read for me. It's really interesting because they talk about all these places in Florence, and I actually studied art history in Florence for a month during my undergrad. I did a course, and I love Florence. Florence is probably my favorite city in the entire world. I think it's absolutely beautiful. It's just stunning, the museums, the architecture, and it's fun for me to like listen to this because they're talking about places and I can picture it. I can picture exactly what they're talking about when they talk about the baptistry doors, or they talk about the Duomo and the Ghiberti's Tower. Like, I know exactly what this is. I've climbed all the steps up to the top of the Duomo. So I definitely know Florence really well, and so it's really interesting because it's kind of, you know, bringing back fond memories of my time in Florence. The story itself is, I think I would actually prefer the story if it didn't have so many like historical interjections. It's definitely like George Eliot researched this really, really well, but it's kind of, it interrupts the story a lot, and I find this sometimes with historical novels. I found this with Les Miserables, is that it takes away from the actual enjoyment of the story because it's constantly being interrupted, and it's kind of this like jerky reading experience. Sorry, I almost just dropped my phone on the floor. And it takes away from the overall enjoyment. But you know what? I would say that this is a bit more fun than Daniel Deronda for me. I'm enjoying this more than I enjoyed Daniel Deronda. So yeah, I definitely enjoyed this novel. But it's a weird reading experience, I think, because I've spent so much time in Florence and I've studied Florence history so much, and it's just kind of, it's a bit weird to be reading a novel about it. It's why I generally avoid historical novels, but I'll give George Eliot a pass on this one. So those are the books that I read in the month of August. Let me know in the comments down below if you guys are planning on reading any of these or if you have read any of these, and I will see you guys in a new space with a new background in my next video. Bye.